Beware. Tonight's descent is unlike any other. These are the stories where the dead refused silence, guiding investigators to the very people who took their life. If you dare to follow, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support fuels the next descent. The evening sky over Edmonton stretched wide, painted with streaks of pink and gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. Amber Tuccaro stepped out of the Nisku Place motel, her sneakers crunching on the gravel lot, her breath visible in the cooling August air. It was August 18, 2010, and the 20-year-old mother had arrived the day before from Fort McMurray with her 14-month-old son, Jacob, and a friend, Evangeline McLean. Amber's life was a balancing act, raising her boy, staying close to her family, and stretching every dollar to make ends meet. The motel, a budget spot just south of the city, was their base for a quick getaway, a chance to explore Edmonton before heading back to the oil town life. Amber's smile, bright and warm, had lit up her mother Tootsie's phone all day with texts about Jacob's giggles and their plans to hit a mall or grab a bite. But now, as dusk settled over Leduc County, Amber had a different plan. She wanted to head into the city, maybe catch a glimpse of Edmonton's lights. With no car and money tight, hitchhiking was the way to go. It wasn't unusual in these parts. Highway 16, the so-called Highway of Tears, was a lifeline for indigenous women like Amber, a route for work, family, or a night out. She kissed Jacob's forehead, left him with Evangeline, and promised to be back soon. Her phone was in her hand as she walked into the fading light, her figure small against the vast Alberta sky. A vehicle slowed on the road, its headlights catching Amber's attention. The driver, a man she didn't know, leaned over and offered her a ride. His voice was friendly, his face shadowed in the dim interior of the car. Amber hesitated for a moment, her instincts sharp, but the need to get into the city won out. She climbed in, the door clicking shut behind her, and the car pulled onto the highway. The man chatted easily at first, asking where she was headed, his tone light as the fields rolled by. Amber answered, her voice steady, but something felt off. The road signs pointed to unfamiliar places, and the man's answers grew vague when she pressed him. Her fingers tightened around her phone, her pulse quickening as the car turned on to a quieter stretch. The kind of road where streetlights are scarce and the world feels too big. Amber knew she needed to act. She thought of her brother, Paul, locked up at the Edmonton Remand Center, a place where every incoming call was recorded. If something went wrong, that recording could be her voice, her proof. She dialed his number, her thumb steady despite the growing knot in her stomach, and held the phone to her ear. The call connected, and Amber's voice filled the line. Clear at first, carrying the strength of a woman who'd faced hard days before. "Hey, where are we going?" The man's voice came back, low and gravelly, insisting they were heading north to 50th Street in Edmonton. "You sure we're going to the city?" Amber pressed, her words deliberate, repeating his directions as if to pin them down. The conversation stretched on. 17 minutes of back and forth that grew heavier with every mile. Amber's voice shifted, the confidence giving way to fear. "You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go," she said, her words sharp, defiant. The man's responses stayed calm, too calm, his assurances hollow as the car veered further from the city light. Amber kept talking, her voice a lifeline, asking again and again where they were headed, her fear palpable through the crackle of the call. She mentioned landmarks, trying to orient herself. But the man's voice dodged her questions, his tone a mask for something darker. Then, abruptly, the call cut off, the line going dead, leaving only silence on the other end. Back at the motel, Evangeline waited, her eyes flicking to the clock. As the hours passed, Amber didn't come back. Jacob slept fitfully, unaware that his mother was gone. By morning, Evangeline's worry turned to panic. Amber would never leave her son, not for a night, not without a word. She called Tootsie, Amber's mother, her voice trembling as she explained. Tootsie's heart sank, her instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. She contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, her words spilling out in a rush as she described her daughter, 5'6", 120 pounds, brown eyes, long dark hair, a Cree woman with a laugh that could light up a room. But the RCMP's response was cold, dismissive. She's probably out partying, they said, suggesting Tootsie wait 24 hours. Tootsie pushed back, her voice firm, insisting Amber wasn't like that she'd never abandoned Jacob. The officers seemed unmoved, their assumptions steeped in stereotypes about Indigenous women, a pattern all too familiar in Alberta's vast rural stretches. Days passed, and the investigation barely stirred. The RCMP logged Amber as a missing person, but did little else. Their efforts sluggish, their attention elsewhere. Weeks turned into months, and Tootsie's frustration grew. The police had interviewed almost no one, not even Evangeline, who'd left the motel with Amber's belongings, which were later destroyed by the RCMP without proper processing. They removed Amber from the missing persons database after unconfirmed sightings, claiming she might have just left town, a decision they later admitted was a mistake. Tootsie and her family refused to let Amber's name fade. Tootsie and her family refused to let Amber's name fade. They organized searches, put up posters, and leaned on community support, their grief fueling a relentless push for answers. Amber's face, her warm smile, her bright eyes, stared out from flyers tacked to telephone poles and shared on social media, a reminder of a life interrupted. The Highway of Tears, a stretch of road notorious for the disappearances of Indigenous women, loomed large in their minds, its shadow a constant presence. 2 years dragged by with no leads, no suspects, no hope from the RCMP. Then, in August 2012, the police made a surprising move. They released a 61-second clip of Amber's call to the public, hoping someone might recognize the man's voice. The audio was chilling, a window into Amber's final moment. "You'd better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go," she said, her voice strong but laced with fear. The man's response, calm and evasive, mentioned 50th Street, but investigators believed he was lying, driving southeast toward the rural fields of Leduc County. The clip played on news broadcasts across Canada, its eerie cadence haunting listeners. Amber's family listened, their hearts breaking as her voice filled their living rooms, a voice they hadn't heard in 2 years. They clung to the hope that someone, somewhere, would know that man, would hear his gravelly tone and call the police. 4 days later, on September 1st, 2012, horseback riders stumbled across human remains in a farmer's field near Leduc, roughly 17 minutes from the Nisku Place Motel. The discovery was grim, a partial skull, later identified through dental records as Amber's. The timing felt too close, almost as if the killer had been spooked by the audio's release, perhaps returning to move her remains. The field, surrounded by tall grass and quiet roads, was the kind of place where secrets stayed buried. Amber's death was ruled a homicide, but her body was too decomposed to reveal much. No cause of death, no DNA, no clear evidence of who'd taken her life. The RCMP scoured the area, their search belated and underfunded, turning up nothing new. The case went cold again. The man's voice on that 17-minute call, the only real clue, locked away in a recording the police wouldn't fully share. Amber's family refused to let her story end there. Tootsie became a vocal advocate, speaking out about the RCMP's mishandling, their slow response, their destruction of Amber's belongings. She pointed to the highway of tears, where dozens of indigenous women had vanished or been killed, their cases often ignored or under-investigated. Amber's call, that 17-minute lifeline, was a rare piece of evidence in a region where too many women disappeared without a trace. The RCMP named no suspects, though they hinted at looking into known predators in the area, men with histories of violence against women. One name floated in rumors, a man linked to other cases along Highway 16, but no arrests were made, no charges filed. The audio clip, played and replayed, became a haunting echo of Amber's courage, her voice a testament to her fight to be heard. Years passed, and the case remained unsolved, a wound that wouldn't heal for Amber's family. Jacob grew up without his mother, his memories of her built from photos and stories. Tootsie kept Amber's name alive, speaking at vigils, pushing for justice, her voice steady even as her heart broke. The RCMP faced scrutiny, their failures laid bare in reports that criticized their treatment of indigenous missing persons cases. In 2015, they admitted to 1,181 cases of missing or murdered indigenous women across Canada, Amber among them, her story one of many that demanded answers. The 17-minute call, still unreleased in full, held clues that might identify her killer, a man whose voice was calm, calculated, and chillingly familiar to someone out there. Tips came in after the audio's release, but none led to a breakthrough. The field where Amber's remains were found stayed quiet, its secrets guarded by the wind and the draft. Amber's story is a call for justice, a reminder of the lives lost along forgotten roads, and the families who fight to keep their names alive. Amber Tucaro's unsolved murder lingers as a haunting plea for answers, her voice on that call a beacon that still echoes. The night air in Riverside, California, was warm and heavy, the kind that settles over the Arlanza neighborhood like a blanket, muffling the sounds of distant traffic. It was February 24, 2006, and Crystal Theobald, a 24-year-old mother of two, sat in the front seat of her brother Justin's white SUV, wedged between him and her boyfriend, Juan Patlin. They were cruising down a quiet street, not far from their family home. Just another evening in a town where gang rivalries simmered beneath the surface. Crystal's laughter filled the car, her voice bright as she teased Justin about his driving. Her mother, Belinda Lane, followed close behind in another vehicle, her headlights catching the back of the SUV as they pulled up to an intersection around 8:40 p.m. The streets were calm, the sky dark, but the peace shattered in an instant. A white Ford Expedition rolled up beside them, its windows tinted, its engine idling with purpose. Before anyone could react, the sharp crack of gunfire tore through the night. Bullets sprayed the SUV, glass exploding as Crystal slumped forward, blood pooling from a wound in her head. Juan clutched his stomach, hit but alive. Justin, untouched, scrambled to hold his sister, his hands shaking as he cradled her in the street, screaming for help. Belinda, in the car behind, saw it all, her daughter's life slipping away in a hail of gunfire meant for someone else. Belinda stumbled out of her car, her legs weak, her heart pounding as she ran to Crystal. The 24-year-old, her pride and joy, lay lifeless in Justin's arms, her dark hair matted with blood. Belinda dropped to her knees, her voice breaking as she whispered a promise to her daughter. "I'm gonna get them, Crystal. They're gonna pay." The words were raw, fueled by grief and rage, as paramedics arrived too late to save her. Crystal, a woman who loved roller coasters, who'd once won $38,000 at a casino and dreamed of starting a business with her then husband, was gone. Her 2 young daughters, now motherless, would grow up without her smile. The police swarmed the scene, their lights flashing against the storefronts, but their questions led nowhere fast. The shooters, members of the 5,150 gang, had mistaken Justin's SUV for one belonging to a rival crew, MD-17, who'd fired at them earlier that day. Crystal and her family had no ties to gangs, no reason to be targets, but that didn't matter. The bullets found her anyway. Belinda's grief was a fire that burned through her, consuming the haze of her own struggles. She'd battled meth addiction for years, a fact Crystal had begged her to overcome, and she'd sold drugs to keep her family afloat. But now, with her daughter dead, Belinda found a new purpose. The police were moving too slowly, their investigation stalled by the tight-lipped world of Riverside's gangs. Belinda wasn't about to wait. She'd heard whispers in the neighborhood, talk that the 5,150 gang hung out on MySpace, the social media platform buzzing with profiles and chat rooms. It was 2006, and MySpace was where people connected, shared, and sometimes revealed too much. Belinda had an idea, one that would define the next decade of her life. She enlisted her 14-year-old niece, Jamie McIntyre, a whip-smart teenager who knew her way around the internet. Together, they crafted a fake MySpace profile under the name Rebecca, using photos of a woman of color to blend into the scene. Jamie's fingers flew across the keyboard, her messages laced with slang to lure in gang members, her goal to get them talking, to let something slip. The plan was simple but heavy. Jamie, pretending to be Rebecca, friended members of 5,150, her messages flirty, her tone casual. She was good at it, too good, making the profile feel real, alive. But it took a toll. Making someone fall in love with someone who's dead is not a good feeling. She'd later say, her voice heavy with the weight of pretending to be someone she wasn't. Belinda pushed harder, her obsession growing. She created another profile, this one called Angel, using Crystal's own photos, a haunting choice that made every message feel like a stab to the heart. Belinda took over the catfishing, her fingers trembling as she typed, her eyes scanning every reply for a clue. She messaged dozens of gang members, her words a mix of charm and probing questions, always careful to keep them engaged. One name kept coming up, William Joke Sotelo, a 17-year-old 5,150 member who owned a white Ford Expedition, the kind of car witnesses saw that night. Belinda's heart raced when she connected with Sotelo. His messages were cocky, brash, but he let details slip, enough for Belinda to piece together his role. She passed every bit of information to the police, who brought Sotelo in for questioning in June 2006. He admitted to driving the expedition that night, naming Julio Lil Huero Heredia, also 17, as the triggerman. The police had a breakthrough, but not enough evidence to hold Sotelo. He slipped away, vanishing from Riverside, leaving Belinda furious, and the case stalled. Her frustration boiled over, and in a moment of raw anger, she blew her cover. She messaged Sotelo from the Angel account. "Why did you kill me? This is Crystal Theobald. I'm the girl you murdered." The words were a gut punch, and Sotelo went silent, disappearing into the shadows. Belinda cursed herself for the slip, but she didn't stop. She kept digging, her nights spent hunched over her computer, her days tracking down leads in the streets of Arlanza. She photographed license plates, staked out houses, even called immigration and customs enforcement to report gang members, hoping to rattle them into talk. Her methods weren't always clean. She admitted to wanting to kill the men who took Crystal's life, though she told her family, no violence, not in Crystal's name. But in her heart, revenge burned as bright as justice. Years passed, and Belinda's life became a mission. She quit drugs, her addiction replaced by an unrelenting drive to find every person involved. The police, wary of her vigilante streak, kept their distance, but her work paid off. In 2011, Julio Heredia was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole, plus 138 years for related charges. 10 others pleaded guilty to lesser counts: witness intimidation, attempted murder, gun and gang charges, with sentences ranging from probation to 18 years. Belinda's MySpace sleuthing had cracked the case open, but Sotelo, the driver, was still out there. She learned he'd fled to Mexico, living quietly as a chili farmer with a wife and 4 kids. Belinda didn't care about his new life. She wanted him to face what he'd done. In 2014, a tip came through Facebook, pinpointing Sotelo's location in central Mexico. Belinda alerted the police, her voice steady as she told them, "I'm coming for you." In May 2016, Sotelo was arrested and extradited to Riverside, charged with murder, attempted murder, and firearm offenses. The trial was a reckoning. Belinda sat in the courtroom, her eyes locked on Sotelo, now 31, a man who tried to leave his gang past behind. He pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, plus gang and firearm charges, in January 2020, accepting a 22-year sentence. Belinda felt a weight lift, but not fully. She'd kept her promise to Crystal, but at a cost. Her methods had stirred up trouble, threatening innocent people who owned white SUVs, sparking gang rivalries, even planning a mass murder she never carried out. Jamie, now a mother and student, had stepped back, haunted by the emotional toll of catfishing. Belinda's family, fractured by grief and her obsession, struggled to heal. Justin, who'd held Crystal as she died, carried the memory in silence, his love for his sister etched in posts on his private Facebook page. Belinda, now 63, stayed active on social media, running a Facebook group called Unsolved Murders in Riverside, dedicated to Crystal's memory and others lost to violence. Her profile picture showed Crystal's face against the sky, an angel watching over her. The case exposed the blurry line between justice and revenge. Belinda's MySpace crusade brought down Crystal's killers, but it also revealed her own darkness, her racial profiling of suspects, her willingness to manipulate and intimidate. The 5,150 gang, young men like Heredia and Sotelo, came from broken homes, drawn to gangs as a twisted family. Heredia's sister, Amalia, spoke of their rough childhood, calling him a father figure despite his crimes. Belinda, in a rare moment of mercy, asked the judge to spare Heredia the death penalty, a flicker of compassion amid her rage. The documentary, Why Did You Kill Me?, captured it all. The murder, the MySpace hunt, the toll on everyone involved. Crystal, a woman who loved adventures and her daughters, became a symbol of a family's relentless fight, but also of the pain that lingers when justice doesn't heal the law. Riverside moved on, its streets still scarred by gang violence, but Belinda's promise to her daughter echoed in every post, every message, every step she took to make sure Crystal's name wasn't forgotten. Crystal Theobald's murder and her mother's decade-long quest for justice remain a testament to a family's unbreakable bond and the shadows it cast. The morning sun spilled through the windows of a modest apartment in Madison, Wisconsin, casting soft light across the kitchen where Tina McQuaig sat with a cup of coffee. It was January 11, 1984, and the 27-year-old biochemist was already thinking about her day at the University of Wisconsin, where she worked in a lab pushing the boundaries of DNA research. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her hazel eyes scanning a notebook filled with meticulous notes on polymerase chain reaction, a technique that could amplify tiny DNA samples, a method she believed would change science forever. Her husband, Timothy, a fellow researcher, had left early for the lab, leaving Tina to savor a quiet moment before her own commute. Their marriage was a partnership of minds and hearts, built on late-night talks about science and dreams of a family. But beneath her focus, a shadow lingered. Tina had been dealing with a colleague, Mark Miller, whose attention had crossed lines. His comments, his lingering stares, his unwanted touches in the lab had pushed her to file a sexual harassment complaint with the university. The hearing was days away, and Tina was ready to testify, her resolve firm despite the knot of unease in her stomach. She didn't know Mark had been watching her, his anger simmering, his plans taking shape. Tina locked the apartment door behind her, her breath visible in the chilly air as she walked to her car, a beat-up hatchback parked on the street. The campus wasn't far, but the drive felt longer that morning, the winter sky heavy with gray cloud. She parked near the biochemistry building, her mind already on her experiments, unaware that Mark, a 32-year-old lab technician, had been tracking her routine. He'd been disciplined after her complaint, his job hanging by a thread, and he blamed Tina for it all. His obsession had grown in the months since, fueled by rejection and rage. He'd driven 200 miles from his new job in Chicago the night before, his pickup truck loaded with a knife, duct tape, and a plan to silence her before she could speak in court. He waited in the parking lot, his breath fogging the window, his eyes locked on Tina as she stepped out of her car. She didn't see him approach, didn't hear his footsteps until it was too late. The attack was swift. Mark grabbed her from behind, his hand over her mouth, dragging her toward a shadowed alley between buildings. Tina fought hard, her nails clawing at his arm, scraping skin as she kicked and twisted. But the knife was faster, sinking into her chest, her screams muffled by his grip. Within moments, she collapsed, her blood pooling on the frozen ground, her eyes wide with shock as life slipped away. Mark fled, his truck roaring out of Madison as he sped back toward Chicago, his heart pounding, but his mind cold. He thought he'd covered his tracks. No witnesses, no cameras in that quiet alley. But Tina's fight had left a mark. Under her fingernails, tiny flecks of his skin held his DNA, a silent witness to her final moments. The police arrived within minutes, alerted by a student who'd heard a muffled cry. They found Tina's body, her lab coat stained red, her notebook still in her bag, pages fluttering in the wind. The scene was grim, the kind that haunts even seasoned officers. Detectives combed the alley, collecting every scrap, blood, fibers, and those crucial skin cells under Tina's nails. The technology to analyze them was in its infancy, but Tina's own work in DNA amplification gave investigators hope. Her lab notes, her research on PCR, pointed to a future where such evidence could name a killer. For now, though, the samples were preserved, frozen in time, waiting for science to catch up. The investigation moved fast, but hit wall. Madison wasn't a town used to brutal murders, and the university was shaken. Timothy, devastated, could barely speak, his grief a heavy weight as he answered police questions. He mentioned Tina's harassment case, pointing them to Mark. But the man had an alibi. Colleagues in Chicago swore he'd been at work the night before. No one had seen him leave, and his apartment showed no signs of a recent trip. Detectives interviewed lab staff, chasing leads on other disgruntled colleagues, but Mark's name kept surfacing. His personnel file was thick with complaints. Other women had reported his behavior, but none had gone as far as Tina. Still, without hard evidence, the case stalled. The DNA under Tina's nails sat in a lab freezer, a puzzle no one could yet solve. Months turned to years, and Timothy moved away, unable to stay in a city that held so much pain. Tina's parents, back in Ohio, put up flyers, offered a reward, their hope fading with each passing season. The case grew cold, another file in a growing stack at the Madison Police Department. But fate has a way of turning the tables. On a snowy evening in February 1987, 3 years after Tina's death, Mark Miller was driving through rural Wisconsin, his truck weaving slightly as he pushed the speed limit. A state trooper, patrolling a quiet highway, clocked him going 15 miles over and pulled him over. Mark was calm, handing over his license, but the trooper noticed scratches on his hands, old but visible, and a nervous edge to his voice. The stop was routine, a ticket issued, but the trooper logged the encounter, noting Mark's Chicago plates and his presence 50 miles from Madison. It was a small detail, one that might have been forgotten, but a detective working Tina's case saw the report during a routine review of cold case leads. Something clicked. Mark had been in the area, his alibi less airtight than it seemed. The detective dug deeper, re-interviewing Tina's colleagues, one of whom recalled Mark's sudden absence from work around the time of the murder. The pieces were falling into place, but they needed more. By 1988, DNA technology was evolving, thanks in part to the work Tina had championed. Alec Jeffries' DNA fingerprinting, refined with techniques like PCR, was making headlines, solving cases like Colin Pitchfork's in the UK. Madison's crime lab, one of the best in the Midwest, dusted off Tina's evidence. The skin under her nails, preserved in that freezer, was now testable. Scientists amplified the DNA, creating a profile that was unique, unmistakable. They needed Mark's DNA to compare, but getting it wasn't easy. He'd moved again, this time to a small town in Indiana. Detectives tracked him down, posing as utility workers to collect a discarded coffee cup from his trash. The DNA matched, a perfect hit, linking him to the skin Tina had clawed from his arm. In June 1988, Mark was arrested, his face pale as officers read his charges: first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and attempted destruction of evidence. He denied everything, claiming he'd never left Chicago. But the DNA told a different story. The trial, in early 1989, gripped Madison. Prosecutors laid out the case with chilling clarity. Tina's harassment complaint, her courage in standing up to Mark, had made her a target. Her own research, her work on amplifying DNA, had given investigators the tools to catch him. The jury heard about the traffic stop, the scratches, the DNA match that placed Mark at the scene. His defense argued contamination, a fluke in the new science, but the evidence was overwhelming. Tina's lab notes, read aloud in court, became her voice, detailing the PCR method that had unlocked her killer's identity. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Mark was sentenced to life without parole, his head bowed as the judge called him a predator who'd betrayed the trust of a scientific community. Tina's parents wept, their relief mixed with the ache of loss. Timothy, watching from afar, felt a bittersweet pride. His wife's work had solved her murder, a legacy that would echo in labs across the world. The case became a landmark, one of the first in the U.S. to use DNA fingerprinting to secure a conviction. Tina's contributions to PCR, though unfinished, helped lay the groundwork for countless cases, from Colin Pitchfork to the Golden State Killer. Her name lived on in scientific journals, her story a reminder of the power of persistence, both in science and justice. The Madison lab where she'd worked dedicated a bench to her, a quiet tribute to a woman whose brilliance outlasted her killer's rage. Mark, now a number in a prison cell, faded into obscurity, his crime a footnote to Tina's legacy. His crime a footnote to Tina's legacy. Her parents, visiting her grave in Ohio, left flowers and whispered thanks, knowing their daughter had fought back, her nails carrying the truth that brought her justice. Tina McQuaig's murder, solved by her own DNA breakthroughs, mirrors the relentless pursuit of truth. The late afternoon of March 15, 2015, hung heavy in a Los Angeles hotel room, the air thick with the tension of a final interview for HBO's The Jinx, the life and deaths of Robert Durst. A 71-year-old real estate heir worth $100 million sat across from filmmaker Andrew Jarecki, his wiry frame slouched, eyes darting beneath his glasses. Durst, the eldest son of New York's powerful Durst organization, had spent decades dodging suspicion in 3 deaths. His wife, Kathleen McCormack, who vanished in 1982. His friend, Susan Berman, shot execution style in 2000. And his neighbor, Morris Black, dismembered in 2001. Jarecki, armed with years of research, confronted Durst with a damning piece of evidence, a handwritten letter he'd sent to Berman in 1999. Its block letters and misspelled Beverly matching an anonymous cadaver note sent to police after her murder, a note only the killer could have written. Durst, burping nervously, shrugged off the similarity, his voice flat but his hands twitching. "I don't know," he muttered, denying he wrote the note. As the interview wrapped, he asked for a bathroom break, unaware his wireless microphone was still live, capturing every word. Alone, he began to mumble, his voice a strange mix of panic and resignation. "There it is. You're caught," he whispered, pacing the small room. What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong. And the burping. I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. Those words, chilling and unguarded, became the bombshell that would unravel his decades-long evasion of justice, recorded by a hot mic he'd forgotten to remove. Durst's saga began years earlier, in the snowy winter of 1982, when Kathleen, a 29-year-old medical student, disappeared from their Westchester County cottage. Kathy, vibrant and ambitious, had married Durst in 1973, but their relationship soured as his controlling nature surfaced. Friends recalled her fear, telling her brother Jim McCormack, "If something happens to me, it's Bob." On January 31st, 1982, after a weekend at the cottage, she vanished. Durst claimed she took a train to Manhattan, but her friends, suspicious, reported her missing. Nobody was found, and the Westchester County Janine Pirro couldn't pin him down, his wealth and family influence casting a long shadow. By 2000, when Pirro reopened the case, Susan Berman, a Las Vegas mobster's daughter and Durst's confidant, was set to talk to police about Kathy's disappearance. She'd provided Durst's alibi in 1982, but now, facing questions, she was a liability. On December 24, 2000, Berman was found dead in her Benedict Canyon home, a single bullet to the back of her head. The cadaver note, mailed to the Beverly Hills police, led them to her body, its misspelling a clue that lay dormant until Jarecki's team unearthed the matching letter years later. Durst's troubles didn't end there. In 2001, hiding in Galveston, Texas, under the alias Dorothy Siner, a mute woman, he killed his neighbor, Morris Black, a 71-year-old drifter. Durst admitted to dismembering Black's body and dumping it in Galveston Bay, claiming self-defense after a struggle over a gun. At his 2003 trial, his lawyer Dick DeGuerin spun a tale of accident, and Durst's wealth funded a high-powered defense. Jurors acquitted him, despite his admission to chopping up the body, a verdict that stunned prosecutors. "Money buys freedom," Pirro later told the New York Times, her voice bitter. Durst, free but paranoid, bounced between aliases and cities, his odd behavior, burping, muttering to himself, cross-dressing, marking him as eccentric but untouchable. That is, until the jinx. Jarecki, inspired by his 2010 film All Good Things, a fictionalized take on Durst's life, spent years earning his trust. Durst, craving the spotlight, agreed to over 20 hours of interviews, a decision he later called a very, 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 very big mistake in court, per Rolling Stone. The filmmaker's discovery of the cadaver notes match, combined with Durst's hot mic confession, changed everything. The bathroom audio, found 2 years after the 2013 interview by editor Shelby Siegel, stunned Jarecki's team. "We screamed," Siegel told The Hollywood Reporter in 2024, recalling the moment she heard "kill them all," of course. The team debated when to turn it over to the FBI, consulting Marcia Clark, the former OJJ Simpson prosecutor, heard the official Jinx podcast dark. On March 14, 2015, the day before the finale aired, Durst was arrested in New Orleans on a first-degree murder warrant for Berman's death, carrying a gun and $42,000 in cash, poised to flee to Cuba. The timing, as Jarecki told Good Morning America, was coincidental, but the evidence, especially the note and audio, reignited the case. At his 2021 trial in Los Angeles, Deputy DeJohn Lewin played the raw audio, though defense attorneys argued it was edited out of sequence, with "kill them all" coming before "what the hell did I do," per the New York Times. The jury, unmoved, convicted Durst of Berman's murder on September 17, 2021, sentencing him to life without parole. He died in prison on January 10, 2022, at 78, from cardiac arrest, his health ravaged by COVID-19 and cancer. Kathy's case, though charged in New York, never went to trial, her body still missing. Her brother Jim, speaking in the Jinx. Part 2, felt closure but no peace, saying, "He took her from us." The Jinx finale, watched by millions, became a cultural phenomenon, winning Emmys and sparking debates about documentary ethics. Critics, like NPR's David Folkenflik, questioned the edited audio, noting it shaped a narrative for drama. But legal experts like Daniel Richman argued it was admissible if untampered, per the New York Times. Durst's wealth, which shielded him for decades, couldn't outrun his own words. His friend Nick Chabon in The Jinx, Part 2, called him a narcissist who thought he could talk his way out of anything. The series, for BBC, not only solved a case but fueled the true crime boom alongside Serial and Making a Murderer. Yet it left scars. Kathy's family, Berman's cousins, and Galveston's community still mourn. Durst's mutterings, a chilling poem of guilt, echoed beyond the bathroom, a silent scream that brought justice at last. As this sorrow blankets Los Angeles' quiet streets, another story of bravery unfolds in a distant corner. The morning of July 11, 2019, broke over Chandler, Arizona, with a relentless desert sun already baking the quiet suburban streets. Charles Vallow, a 62-year-old businessman, stood in the kitchen of his home on East Linda Lane, his heart pounding as he faced his estranged wife, Lori Vallow, and her brother, Alex Koch. Charles, tall and broad-shouldered, had been unraveling for months, his marriage to Lori crumbling under the weight of her increasingly erratic behavior. Once a vibrant couple who'd married in 2006, raising Lori's daughter Tylee Ryan and their adopted son Joshua J.J. Vallow, they now stood on opposite sides of a dangerous divide. Charles had told police multiple times that year, his voice captured on body cam footage, about Lori's chilling threat. "She says she's a god, that she can murder me with her powers," he'd told a Chandler officer in February, his face etched with words. Lori, 46, blonde and charismatic, had fallen deep into apocalyptic beliefs, calling Charles a zombie possessed by a spirit named Ned. She'd met Chad Daybell, a self-published author of doomsday novels, in 2018, and their shared obsession with the end times had spiraled into something deadly. That morning, as Tylee, 16, lingered nearby, an argument erupted. Charles, trying to de-escalate, reached for a baseball bat to calm things. But Alex, a burly man with a loyal streak, grabbed his gun. 2 shots rang out, piercing Charles's chest, one fired as he lay on the floor, according to medical examiner Derek Bunger's later testimony. Alex called 911, claiming self-defense, his voice steady but rehearsed. Lori, calm and nonchalant when police arrived, said she'd been out dropping JJ at school. Charles's body lay cold in the kitchen, the start of a gruesome chain of events. The Chandler Police Department, initially treating the shooting as self-defense, let Alex walk free, but Charles's siblings, Kay Woodcock and Jerry Vallow, refused to let it go. Kay, JJ's biological grandmother, had already grown suspicious when Charles changed his $1 million life insurance policy in February 2019, naming her as beneficiary instead of Lori, a change Lori discovered only after his death. Texting Chad in fury, "It's a spear through my heart," per East Idaho News. Kay alerted police to JJ's disappearance months later, sparking a wider investigation. By late 2019, Lori and Chad, now lovers, had fled to Hawaii, leaving behind a trail of horrors. Tylee and JJ, last seen in September 2019, were found buried on Chad's Idaho property in June 2020. Tylee's remains burned and dismembered. JJ wrapped in plastic, duct tape with Lori's DNA binding him, per court testimony. Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, died in October 2019. Her death, initially deemed natural, later ruled a homicide by asphyxiation. Lori's brother Alex, suspected in all these crimes, died of a pulmonary embolism in December 2019, escaping charges. The web of deaths pointed to Lori and Chad, whose doomsday cult beliefs labeled their victims as dark spirits blocking their divine mission, according to prosecutors. Lori's unraveling began years earlier, her once happy marriage to Charles eroding as she dove into Chad's writings. By 2018, she was hosting religious podcasts with him, speaking of zombies and a coming apocalypse. Charles, desperate, filed for divorce in February 2019, telling police Lori had vanished for 58 days, claiming she didn't care about him or JJ. Her friend April Raymond later testified Lori called Charles a demon, a belief she extended to her children. When Charles confronted Lori about her affair with Chad, she doubled down, telling followers he was possessed. Adam Cox, another brother, testified in 2025 that he and Charles planned an intervention to pull Lori back to their Mormon faith, but the shooting stopped it. Alex was at Lori's house that morning. It felt wrong, Adam told the court, convinced they conspired. Text messages between Lori, Alex, and Chad, uncovered by Chandler detective Nathan Duncan, revealed their plot, referring to Charles as Ned and discussing his death as necessary for their prophecy. Lori's motive, prosecutors argued, was clear. Charles's $1 million insurance policy and freedom to marry Chad, which she did weeks after Tammy's death. Lori's arrest in Hawaii in February 2020, after refusing to produce JJ and Tylee, cracked the case open. Charged in Idaho with murder, conspiracy, and grand theft for collecting Social Security benefits after her children's deaths, she was convicted in May 2023, receiving 3 life sentences without parole. Chad, tried separately, was convicted in May 2024 and sentenced to death, extradited to Arizona. In November 2023, Lori faced 2 more trials, representing herself in both. The first, beginning March 31, 2025, charged her with conspiring to murder Charles Duck. Prosecutors, led by Trina Kay, presented damning evidence. Texts showing Lori's anger over the insurance change, Charles's police reports, and Adam's testimony. A Chandler firefighter described finding Charles shot in the chest, while Officer Cassandra Inclan noted Lori's eerie calm. Lori claimed Alex acted alone, protecting her and Tylee from Charles's alleged attack with a bat. But the jury, after 3 hours of deliberation, found her guilty on April 22, 2025. Her second trial, starting June 25, convicted her of conspiring to murder Brandon Boudreaux, her niece's ex-husband, shot at in October 2019 by Alex, who missed. On July 25, 2025, Judge Justin Bereski sentenced Lori to 2 consecutive life sentences with parole possible after 25 years, slamming her claim of an unfair trial. "You've shattered lives," he said, as Charles's son, Colby, Ryan wept, recalling his father's kindness. At sentencing, Kay Woodcock's voice broke as she spoke of J.J., Charles, and Tylee, stolen in one swoop. Brandon, tearful, forgave Lori for his own peace, but noted her lack of remorse. Juror Victoria Lewis, speaking to KPNX, said Lori's flippant demeanor, smiling, laughing, sealed her fate. The trials, live-streamed per Judge Bareski's ruling, gripped the nation, fueled by Lori's bizarre claims of being a goddess. Her Idaho convictions, detailed in a Netflix documentary, cemented her as the doomsday mom. Charles's warnings, captured on tape, became his silent scream, exposing Lori's deadly intent. Though Alex pulled the trigger, Lori's conspiracy, driven by greed and twisted faith, brought justice down on her. As this sorrow blankets Chandler's quiet streets, another story of bravery unfolds in a distant corner. The evening sky over Bolingbrook, Illinois, hung heavy with clouds, the kind that promise rain, but hold back, leaving the air thick and restless. It was October 28, 2007, and Stacy Peterson, a 23-year-old with sandy blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room, stood in the kitchen of her suburban home. The house, a sprawling two-story on a quiet cul-de-sac, was filled with the chaos of family life. Two young children, Anthony and Lacey, playing nearby, and Drew Peterson's older sons from his third marriage, Thomas and Christopher, sprawled on the couch. Drew, a 53-year-old former police sergeant, moved through the house with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades in control, his broad frame filling doorways, his voice carrying an edge that could shift from charming to cold in a heartbeat. Stacy, his fourth wife, was used to his moods, but lately, something had changed. She'd been distant, her laughter quieter, her eyes darting when he spoke. That night, she told Drew, she was stepping out, maybe to run an errand or see a friend. She grabbed her purse, kissed her kids, and walked out the door, her footsteps fading into the crisp autumn night. She was never seen again. Stacy's disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was a spark that reignited a fire. Drew Peterson, once a respected Bolingbrook cop, had a past that clung to him like a shadow. His third wife, Kathleen Savio, had died 3 years earlier, her body found in a dry bathtub, her hair matted with blood from a gash on her scalp. The coroner, a friend of Drew's, had called it an accident, a slip and fall that ended in drowning, despite the bruises on her body and the 18 domestic disturbance calls to their home during their marriage. Kathleen had told her sister, Susan Doman, a different story. He's gonna kill me. She'd whispered over the phone in 2003, her voice trembling as she described Drew's threats, his hand on her throat, his promise to make her death look like an accident. Susan had begged her to leave, but Kathleen, an accountant with 2 young sons, was fighting for a divorce settlement, determined to protect her boys. When she died, just months after the divorce was finalized, Susan's grief carried a bitter certainty. Drew had made good on his threat. Stacy, too, had seen the darkness in Drew. She was just 17 when they met, a hotel receptionist drawn to the charismatic cop 30 years her senior. By 2003, they were married, raising 4 children in a house filled with tension. Stacy confided in her pastor, Neil Shorey, sitting across from him in a coffee shop, her hands wrapped, around a mug as she spoke in hushed tones. "I think Drew killed Kathleen," she said, her eyes wide with fear. She told Scory about Drew's late-night absences, his cryptic comments about knowing how to hide a body, his police training that made him untouchable. She was scared, not just for herself, but for her children, and she was planning to leave him. Shorey urged her to be careful, to document everything, but Stacy's fear was palpable. She knew too much, and Drew knew it, and Drew knew it. When she vanished, Shorey's heart sank. He went to the police, his words echoing Kathleen's warnings, but Stacy's body was nowhere to be found, and Drew's story was slick. "She ran off with another man," he told investigators, shrugging, his voice calm, almost amused. He said she'd called him at 9 p.m. that night, leaving her car at a nearby airport. The police searched, but the trail was cold. Bolingbrook buzzed with suspicion. Drew, a 30-year veteran of the police force, had a reputation, charming to some, controlling to others. His second wife, Victoria Connolly, had spoken of his abuse, his need to dominate, his affairs that tore their marriage apart. His first wife, Carol Brown, had left him after he cheated while undercover. Now, with Stacy gone and Kathleen's death under scrutiny, the whispers grew louder. The Illinois State Police reopened Kathleen's case, exhuming her body in November 2007. A second autopsy told a different story. Bruises, scrapes, and that deep gash on her scalp pointed to a struggle, not a fall. The coroner ruled it a homicide, and Drew, who'd retired from the force just weeks after Stacy's disappearance, was named a suspect. He didn't flinch. He courted the media, joking on talk shows, suggesting a win-a-date with Drew contest, his swagger masking the cracks in his story. But behind the bravado, the evidence was mounting. Investigators dug into Drew's life, piecing together a puzzle that spanned years. They found a blue plastic barrel purchased by Drew and his friend Rick Means in 2003, the kind big enough to hold a body. Mims, a cable worker who'd known Drew for years, told police Drew had been secretive about it, storing it in his garage. Witnesses recalled Drew's late-night drives, his access to police resources, his training in evidence handling and crime scene staging. Kathleen's sister, Susan, testified about the threats, her voice steady as she recounted Kathleen's fear. Stacy's pastor shared her confessions, his words heavy with the weight of her absence. Hearsay, normally inadmissible, became the backbone of the case, thanks to a 2008 Illinois law dubbed Drew's Law, tailored to let Kathleen and Stacy's statements speak from beyond the grave. The law allowed prosecutors to use their words, Kathleen's warnings to Susan, Stacy's fears to Shorey, as evidence of Drew's intent. By May 2009, Drew was arrested, his face plastered across every news channel. The indictment charged him with Kathleen's murder, alleging he'd drowned her in that bathtub to protect his finances from a divorce settlement. The trial in 2012 was a spectacle. Drew sat in the courtroom, his once jovial demeanor replaced by a cold stare, his high-priced attorneys arguing he'd been framed. Prosecutors painted a picture of a man who used his police training to kill, staging Kathleen's death as an accident, just as he'd bragged he could. They had no physical evidence tying him directly to the scene. No fingerprints, no DNA, but the hearsay was damning. A friend of Kathleen's testified that Drew had once held a knife to her throat, saying, "I could kill you and make it look like an accident." Stacy's divorce lawyer, Harry Smith, recounted her fears. her belief that Drew was capable of murder. The jury deliberated for less than a day. On September 6, 2012, they found Drew guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 38 years. His pension stripped after a court ruled he'd used his police skills to commit the crime. But Drew's story didn't end there. From his cell at Menard Correctional Center, he seethed, his anger fixed on James Glasgow, the Will County State's attorney who'd put him away. In 2015, a fellow inmate tipped off authorities. Drew was plotting to kill Glasgow, offering $10,000 for a hit. The inmate, wearing a wire, recorded Drew's plans, his voice gleeful as he called it a Christmas present. The tapes were chilling, Drew's words, a mix of bravado and delusion, even boasting about smuggling drugs for a cartel. Why, hi. In May 2016, he was convicted of solicitation to commit murder for hire, adding 40 years to his sentence. He was moved to a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, his location later hidden for security reasons. Through it all, he maintained his innocence, shouting in court, "I did not kill Kathleen," as Susan Doman yelled back. "Yes, you did, you liar." His appeals failed, the Illinois Supreme Court upholding his conviction in 2017. In 2017, Stacy's case, though, remained open, a wound that wouldn't close. The FBI searched canals near Bolingbrook in 2021, their boats scouring the murky water for her remains, but found nothing. Drew, the only suspect, was never charged. His story about her running off with another man, unshaken by years of scrutiny. Stacy's family, led by her sister Cassandra Cales, kept searching, their hope fading, but never gone. Cassandra used sonar to scan local waterways, her determination mirroring Belinda Lane's MySpace hunt for her daughter's killer years earlier. In another case, Stacy's children, Anthony and Lacey, grew up without her, their memories built from photos and stories. Drew's older sons, Thomas and Christopher, stood by their father, their loyalty a stark contrast to the world's judgment. The Bolingbrook house stood quiet now, its walls holding secrets no one could pry loose. Drew's life, once marked by a badge and a pension, was reduced to a cell, his charm useless behind bars. Kathleen's death had been avenged, but Stacy's fate hung like those clouds over Bolingbrook, heavy with questions no one could answer. The media frenzy faded, but the case lingered, a reminder of a man who'd worn a uniform and wielded power, only to leave a trail of loss. Drew's voice, once loud on talk shows, was silenced, but Stacy's absence spoke louder, her pastor's words echoing in the minds of those who still hoped for closure. The night was thick with humidity, the kind that presses against your skin and makes every breath feel heavy. Odin Lloyd stepped out of his modest Dorchester home, his sneakers scuffing against the cracked pavement as he approached the silver Nissan Altima idling at the curb. It was June 17, 2013, and the Boston suburb hummed with the distant pulse of traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the street. Odin, 27, carried himself with the quiet confidence of a semi-pro football player, his broad shoulders and quick smile, a testament to years spent chasing dreams on the field. Oh, he had no reason to suspect the man behind the wheel, Aaron Hernandez, the New England Patriots star tight end, would lead him anywhere but a night of camaraderie. Hernandez, with his NFL fame and million-dollar smile, was someone Odin trusted, someone he'd hung out with before. Two other men, Ernest Wallace and Carlos Ortiz, sat in the car, their faces familiar but unremarkable. Their faces familiar, but just part of the crew, Odin thought. Sliding into the back seat, the Altima pulled away, its headlights cutting through the dim streets as it wound out of Dorchester toward North Attleboro, a gritty industrial area far from the bright lights of Boston. Odin's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out, his fingers tapping out a quick message to his girlfriend, Shania Jenkins. Know who I'm with. NFL, just so you know. The words carried a flicker of unease, a gut instinct he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way Hernandez's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, or the way Wallace and Ortiz sat in silence, their eyes catching in the rearview mirror. The air in the car felt charged, like the moment before a play snaps into motion, but Odin pushed the feeling down. This was Aaron Hernandez, a man he'd partied with, laughed with. Nothing to worry about, not yet. The car turned onto a desolate road, flanked by gravel lots and looming warehouses, their shadows stretching long under the faint glow of streetlights. North Attleboro's industrial park was a ghost town at 3 a.m., the kind of place where sound dies quickly, swallowed by the vast emptiness. The Altima slowed, tires crunching on loose stone, and came to a stop in a clearing. Odin's heart must have quickened as Hernandez turned, his face unreadable in the dark. "Get out," he said, his voice low-clipped. Wallace and Ortiz opened their doors, stepping into the night, their movements deliberate. Odin followed, his sneakers sinking into the gravel, the air cool against his skin. He didn't see the gun in Hernandez's hand until it was too late. The first shot shattered the silence, a sharp crack that echoed off the warehouses. Odin stumbled, pain searing through his chest as the bullet tore into him. Another shot followed, then another, 5 in total, ripping through his arms, back, and torso. He collapsed onto the gravel, his blood pooling beneath him, warm and sticky against the cold ground. His phone, still tucked in his pocket, held that final message to Shania, a lifeline he'd sent without knowing it would be his last. Hernandez and his accomplices didn't linger. The Altima's engine roared to life, its taillights disappearing into the night, leaving Odin alone, his body still, his dreams bleeding out into the dirt. Morning came, and a jogger found him, sprawled in the clearing, his skin cold, his eyes fixed on the sky. Police swarmed the scene, yellow tape fluttering in the breeze as detectives surveyed the grim tableau. Odin Lloyd, a landscaper by day, a football player by passion, was dead at 27, gunned down execution style in a place where no one would hear the shots. The question wasn't just who, but why. Odin wasn't a criminal, not a gang member or a dealer. He was a guy who worked hard, loved his family, and dated Shania Jenkins, the sister of Hernandez's fiancée, Cheyenne. The connection to Hernandez was the first thread investigators pulled, and it unraveled fast. Hernandez's life was a house of cards, and Odin's death was the gust that brought it down. Detectives found the Altima at a rental agency, linked to Hernandez through paperwork. Surveillance footage from his $1.30 million mansion showed him leaving that night, holding what looked like a .45 caliber Glock, with Wallace and Ortiz in tow. A piece of chewing gum and a spent shell casing near Odin's body matched items in the car. Hernandez's own sloppiness was his undoing. Cameras caught him at a gas station, at his home, even driving through the industrial park. Why, yeah, driving through the industrial park. But the motive was murkier, tangled in whispers of betrayal and paranoia. Odin, some said, knew too much about Hernandez's past, his ties to rough characters from Bristol, Connecticut, where he'd grown up. Others pointed to a falling out, a clash over something trivial that Hernandez, volatile and prideful, couldn't let go. Shania's connection to both men added another layer. Maybe Odin had seen or heard something about Hernandez's double life, his late-night deals, his temper that flared behind closed doors. Whatever the truth, Hernandez had lured Odin to that clearing with intent, orchestrating an ambush that left a family shattered. The investigation moved swiftly. Hernandez was arrested 9 days later, his NFL career crumbling as police searched his mansion. They found ammunition, but no murder weapon. Hernandez had made sure of that. Still, the evidence was overwhelming. Tire tracks, DNA, phone records, and that damning surveillance footage painted a picture of a man who thought his fame made him untouchable. The Patriots cut him loose, and the NFL world reeled. Aaron Hernandez, the kid from Bristol who'd risen to stardom, was now a murder suspect, his $40 million contract meaningless. The trial began in January 2015, a media circus that gripped the nation. Hernandez sat in the courtroom, his boyish charm replaced by a hardened stare, his tattoos peeking out from under his suit. Prosecutors laid out the case with surgical precision. Hernandez had planned the killing, driven Odin to the industrial park, and pulled the trigger himself. Witnesses testified about his erratic behavior, his obsession with loyalty, his flashes of rage. A jailhouse call caught him joking about the murder, his voice cold, detached. Shania took the stand, her grief raw, as she recounted Odin's last message, those chilling words. NFL, just so you know. The defense tried to pin the blame on Wallace and Ortiz, painting them as the real killers. But the jury wasn't swayed. On April 15, 2015, Hernandez was convicted of first-degree murder, sentenced to life without parole. Wallace and Ortiz faced lesser charges, their roles secondary to the man who'd called the shots. Odin's family sat through every grueling day of the trial, their pain etched into their faces. Ursula Ward, Odin's mother, spoke of her son's kindness, his hustle, his love for his sisters, and his team. He was the guy who'd shovel neighbors' driveways in winter, who'd light up a room with his laugh. His death left a void no verdict could fill. Hernandez's downfall continued after the trial. In 2017, he was acquitted in a separate double murder case. But days later, he hanged himself in his cell, leaving behind a note and a legacy of question. Some said he was haunted by his own demons, addiction, paranoia, a traumatic brain injury from years on the field. Others saw a man who'd always been reckless, untethered, willing to kill to protect his image. For Odin's family, it didn't matter. Their son, their brother, was gone, his life snuffed out in a calculated betrayal. The case lingered in Boston's memory, a cautionary tale of fame and its shadows. Odin Lloyd, a man who lived for football and family, became a symbol of senseless loss, his name tied forever to the man who ended his life. The industrial park where he died is still there, quiet now, the gravel long since cleared of blood. But for those who knew Odin, the pain remains as sharp as that June night when a friend became a killer. The late summer sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Lexington, Kentucky, on August 15, 1996, casting a golden glow across the sprawling pastures of bluegrass farms. Ellen Whitmore, a 42-year-old horse trainer, known for her gentle touch with thoroughbreds, moved through her daily routine in the barn, her boots crunching on the straw-strewn floor. Her life revolved around horses, training them, riding them, loving them since she was a girl. But her home life was a different story, one shadowed by fear. Her husband, Thomas Whitmore, a 45-year-old horse breeder, with a temper as unpredictable as a spooked stallion, had grown increasingly controlling since their marriage 5 years earlier. Ellen, once vibrant and outspoken, had become quieter. Her friends noticing bruises she'd dismiss as barn accidents. In the quiet of their home office, tucked in a filing cabinet, she'd hidden a letter written in her neat script. If anything happens to me, if I die suddenly, it was Thomas. He's not what he seems. I'm scared. That evening, as she led a young mare named Starlight into her stall, tragedy struck, or so it seemed. Thomas claimed he found her collapsed in the barn, blood pooling from a head wound, the mare's hoofprints nearby. She got kicked. He told the 911 operator at 7:32 p.m., his voice shaking with what sounded like grief. The horse must have spooked. Paramedics arrived at Bluegrass Farms, their sirens cutting through the quiet evening, and found Ellen lifeless on the barn floor, her skull fractured, her face bruised. The scene looked convincing. Hay scattered, Starlight pacing nervously, a hoof-shaped mark near Ellen's temple. Thomas, his eyes red, told Deputy Sarah Klein of the Fayette County Sheriff's Office that Ellen had been struggling with the mare, known for its skittish nature. She was trying to calm her down, he said, his hands trembling. I was in the house, heard a scream, and ran out. The coroner, Dr. James Paddle, initially ruled it an accident, citing blunt force trauma consistent with a horse kick. Ellen's death, tragic but not uncommon in their world, seemed destined to fade into the statistics of equine accidents. But her best friend, Laura Hensley, refused to let it rest. Laura, who'd known Ellen since their teens, remembered her fear of Thomas, whispered confessions over coffee about his rages, his threats when she talked of leaving. She said he'd never let her go. Laura told Klein, her voice firm. Ellen was too good with horses to get kicked like that. Laura's insistence, paired with a tip from Ellen's sister, Megan, led police to search the Whitmore home. In the office, tucked inside a locked drawer of the filing cabinet, Klein found the letter. Ellen's words, written 3 months earlier, were chilling. Thomas has hit me before. He says he'll make it look like an accident if I try to leave. If I'm gone, he did it. The discovery shifted everything. Detectives, now led by Lieutenant Mark Evans, re-examined the barn. The hoofprint near Ellen's head was too perfect, almost staged, and Starlight's stall showed no signs of a struggle, no scuffed walls, no broken board. A veterinary exam, ordered by Evans, found the mare calm, with no blood or hair on her hooves, unusual for such a violent kick. Forensic pathologist Dr. Emily Ruiz analyzed Ellen's wounds, noting the fracture pattern suggested a blunt object, not a hoof, and faint ligature marks on her neck hinted at strangulation. This wasn't a horse, Ruiz told Evans, her voice steady. Someone hit her hard and tried to make it look like one. Thomas's story began to unravel. His financial records, pulled by the prosecution, showed he'd taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Ellen 6 months prior, his signature alone on the dotted line. A neighbor, John Carter, reported hearing raised voices from the Whitmore home the night before, followed by a heavy thud. Thomas was arrested on August 22, 1996, charged with murder. The investigation uncovered a trail of control and abuse. Ellen's diary, found in the same cabinet, detailed years of Thomas's violence, slaps, shoves, threats to end her if she left. A co-worker at Bluegrass Farms, Miguel Torres, recalled Thomas's jealousy, how he'd storm into the barn if Ellen spoke too long with male trainers. He'd grab her arm. "Pull her away," Miguel said, his voice low. She just looked down, like she was trapped. The prosecution, led by Assistant to Karen Walsh, built a case around the letter, calling it Ellen's Voice from Beyond. At the trial in Fayette County Circuit Court, starting March 10, 1997, Walsh presented the forensic evidence, the diary, and Laura's testimony about Ellen's fear. Thomas's defense, led by attorney Robert Gaines, argued the letter was written in a moment of anger, not fact, and insisted Starlight's kick was a tragic accident. "Horses are unpredictable," Gaines told the jury. Ellen knew the risks, but the jury, after hearing Dr. Ruiz's testimony that the wounds didn't match a hoof's force, deliberated for just 4 hours. On March 18th, they convicted Thomas of first-degree murder. Judge Margaret Holt sentenced him to life with a minimum of 25 years, calling his actions calculated and cruel. Ellen's family, gathered in the courtroom, wept as her sister Megan read a statement. "Ellen loved horses, loved life. Ellen loved horses." But Thomas took that from her. Her letter gave her justice. The case, reported by the Lexington Herald-Leader and later featured in a 1998 Dateline episode, shocked Kentucky's horse country, where accidents were common but murder was not. Thomas, now 74, remains at Eastern Kentucky Correctional Complex, his appeals exhausted by 2005. Ellen's memory lives on at Bluegrass Farms, where a small plaque honors her, placed by Laura near Starlight's stall. The community rallied, raising funds for a scholarship and Ellen's name for aspiring horse trainers. Her letter, hidden in that cabinet, became her silent scream, a beacon of truth that brought her killer to justice. As this sorrow blankets Lexington's quiet pastures, another story of bravery unfolds in a distant corner.